Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another episode of Islam for Europeans. I'm your host, Robert. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Welcome to all of our friends, our brothers and sisters, and to all of our haters, because I know that there are probably several out there. But today I'm very pleased to have Brother Nabeel Azeez on our show today. We've talked many times on X regarding many situations involving Islam for Europeans. How are you doing today, Brother Nabeel? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Wonderful, that's great. Before we get started into the meat of the arguments, I noticed that you have several kind of like entrepreneurial efforts. Did you want to talk briefly about those? Just to give us, or just anything related to your autobiography that you want people to know about you before we start talking about stuff. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. So I am a copywriter slash marketing consultant based in Dubai. That's my sort of main thing. I mean, I work for myself, but I'll call it a 9 to 5. Besides that, I train other copywriters in a membership community, and as well as that, I am the I guess you could call it editor-in-chief of MuslimMan.com, which is a newsletter and media company for Muslim men. Um, in addition to that, I am the author of 40 Hadith on Masculinity, How to Be a Good Man, and 40 Hadith on Femininity, How to Be a Good Woman, which is both of those books are available wherever you can buy your books online.
Mashallah, mashallah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, feel for those who are watching, please subscribe to Brother Nabeel's accounts, and if you're in the UAE area or if you need his services, please reach out to him. Um, so I guess let's talk about the first topic we wanted to originally speak about, and there's been this huge debate in America, specifically, but this also extends to Canada as well, about, I guess, Indian immigration, to the West, and more, I guess, tangentially, the, conflicts and, feelings of, I guess, Muslims, of non-European origin or Indian origin, um, going through and experiencing, maybe racism, their grade school, high school, and having this feeling that it's more, I don't want to say, revenge, but I guess you could count it as that. So, responded, I guess in one tweet you said, and I want to see if I can quote you directly on this. I'm still trying to find it. It was like about a week ago or a couple of days ago or so. But basically, you're saying that many some non-whites in the West, we don't want to generalize, but they kind of feel this sense that uh, there's this sense of wanting to get back at like the white man. So I'll give you the floor to like just so you can kind of like flesh out and sort of extrapolate on this idea and just create any caveats that you want. Again, I don't want to misquote you or anything. So the floor is yours, Nabeel. What do you have? What are your general thoughts on that and how it like applies to like some people in the Muslim community?
Yeah, so thank you. Let me just pull up the tweet real quick. I know exactly where it is. So, um, you want to read the tweet out? Shall I read it out for people who aren't familiar with it? You're muted, bro. You're gonna have to do some cleaning up
Sorry, I'm okay. I'm not
after
muted
this.
anymore. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, I
okay.
mean,
I got.
since this is recorded, we can go on like a side tangent and stuff where that you can cut out later. So
I
I've got the tweet pulled up. While when you edit, maybe you can put it on screen
Yeah.
for people like when you're doing your post production, so
Mm.
people can see it. But I'll read the tweet out. And Actually, maybe let's share the screen. Turn on screen sharing for me.
I'm sharing right now, so people are
Okay.
looking at it right now. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So, all right, so I mean, the tweet is worded deliberately provocative. And I mean, I'll just read it word for word. And it says, um, I will lose my brown card for saying this. One, only American whites believe in individualism, meritocracy, fair play, color blindness, etc. Everywhere else in the world, including the white places, your station in life is based on where you're born, who your parents are, who you know, where you went to school, etc. England, for example, is terribly classist. Point number two, brown, black, and yellow people want revenge on whites for beating us during colonialism. And we, in quotes, we don't care how we get it. Immigration, jobs, government benefits, etc. Point number three, browns, blacks, and yellows born in America never got over whatever racism they faced growing up, being called towelhead, sand N-word, apu, etc. Once they have any power over white Americans, or whites in general, anywhere in the world, they will use it to harm them. Point number four, browns, blacks, and yellows are the most racist peoples in all of the world, and most of all, towards each other. Slightly different browns, blacks, and yellows. And the final point, and this is the most important point of the entire tweet, is generalizations aren't universalizations, but in general, by and large, what I have said is true. Now, and this tweet really is um, a response to this whole debate that was happening on X about H-1B immigrants and this whole back and forth. Now, I am not, I used to live in America, but I don't live in America anymore. I was there on a student visa, what they call an F1 visa. So, I mean, I'm not qualified to comment on this whole H-1B conversation. In the same way, I'm not qualified to comment on this whole grooming gang business that is going viral on Twitter right now, as of the recording of this interview. But what I wanted to sort of put into words is the sort of sentiment that I see, the general sentiment that I see from colored people, people of color, towards whites, and um, by and large, this is the general feeling. A lot of people would deny it, and you can see it in the replies. Ton of so many people denying it, blah blah. Oh, this is not true. I don't think like this. Okay, fine. You're one of the good ones. You're one of the exceptions. Um, but if you're a brown person, and I mean I include blacks and yellows here, but that was just for shock value. Uh, nobody nobody says yellow anymore, but it's just funny to me. Most of this tweet, the way this tweet was written was to amuse me, first of all. It's why it's so abrasively written. And so the idea is that, okay, if you're like, okay, I'm brown, so I know the kinds of conversations that happen amongst brown people. I mean, for the past, like, I'm in my 40s now, so 40 years of my life, you hear things as you're a kid. I mean, you hear things growing up. You hear things, when you're an adult and among other people of your kind. And so that is sort of the sentiment that I wanted to convey here.
Mm. Would you say that this sentiment is, I guess, less prevalent or somewhat tempered among Muslims from the Indian subcontinent as compared to non-Muslims? Or would you say it's around the same, or would you say it's worse in general?
Say that again one more time.
Would do you among people from the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, would you say that Muslims feel this more strongly, or is it tempered by the fact that they're Muslim compared to non-Muslims living who are from the subcontinent, Sikhs, Hindus?
I can only speak for the Muslims because I don't interact with any uh, kafir brown people, anyways. Um, and the few non-Muslims I know, they're Western born and raised. So I mean, the few non-Muslim brown people I know specifically. So
Mhm.
I can only speak for the Muslims. But I mean, I don't see why there would be a reason why there would be any difference in these sentiments, whether you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim brown. But my feeling is, even though I don't know how the non-Muslim browns think about it, my feeling is that the sentiment would be stronger, slightly stronger among Muslims, because um, colonial powers would be like the only people who were fighting colonial powers, like actively, were the Muslims in those times, right? Because we have this concept of defensive jihad. Doesn't matter what country we're living in. If the Muslims in India, there's so many stories about how the British would the colonial British would kill the ulama first and kill them en masse because it was the ulama who were motivating and inspiring the people to fight back, right? So there is that sentiment. So I would think that it's probably slightly more among Muslims than it is among non-Muslims.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to play the devil's advocate, here. I'm going, to, I guess further flesh out, these ideas. Personally, no, before I do that though, personally, the way I feel about colonialism is that it happened. Like it was a factor of its day. Basically, back then in the pre-modern era, it was conquer or be conquered. Like this was like, there was no UN back then. There was no uh, concrete lines written between countries. Uh, you had resources, people, different areas, different empires had resources, and the only way to survive as an empire, you're thinking in your head because there's very few interactions with other peoples, is to just get whatever land you get your hands on. Having said that, you know, I don't think Europeans should have ever left Europe. I think that it was a horrible idea to try to colonize the entire world. We had this white man's burden that we felt like we had to educate and bring all of this technology by any means necessary to the non-European world. And one could say, pro-colonialists will say, well, look, we did about the railroads and better irrigation methods and the fact that the South population in South Asia significantly increased because we have better medicine and everything like that. In my opinion, that's all moot, because the atrocities, and let's call them atrocities, they did happen. The Sepoy Mutiny, um, like I'm not denying that these horrible things happened due to colonialism, but I mean, and all said and done, you can't go back and change the future. I think that Europeans should have never left Europe, but I don't think that Europeans of today, first of all, they didn't benefit from colonialism. That's a common myth that somehow European powers went into the non-Muslim world, or the non-European world, basically plundered everything, and then spread that money evenly to the rest of the Europeans. That's a lie. I mean, like most Europeans are just living off of working in coal mines at the age of 6. And you need an incredible amount of money and resources just to go into the colonial world. So that wealth could have been better spent amongst the people. And then on top of that, we're talking about several generations removed. So for me, it just seems, you know, I don't know how you can justify the sort of trying to get back at white people in general for something that their ancestors may or may not have done and may or may not have benefited from. So do you ever kind of present these arguments to fellow Muslims to say you can't really Islamically justify this blanket anger towards white people, or is it just basically look, it's it's understandable that they feel this anger. I think it's understandable, to a degree. Hey, I was picked on in school as well. But again, I was with other white people. If I was picked on by people of other races, I would feel that anger as well. So, do you think that Islam can kind of, I don't want to say temper, but like sort of guide this resentment, frustration in a better direction? Uh,
I mean, I'll tell you this. First of all, like I am not like a polemicist or a da'i or online preacher of any sort. Um, I like the Muslim Man newsletter. I mean, I don't want to use the word, but the only word I can think of is a secular kind of newsletter. We talk about lifestyle,
hmm,
entrepreneurship, health and wellness, et cetera, for Muslim men. Yeah, there is an overlap of Muslimicness, right? But that is not the the primary core theme of the website and the newsletter.
hmm,
So when you tell me when you ask me have I presented any of these arguments to Muslims, like I don't present any arguments to Muslims of any sort.
yeah.
I used to when I was a little bit younger. I used to be all into kind of debating and things like that, and establishing the hack and all that kind of stuff. But nowadays, I just post what I want to post, and people who want to read me. People who don't want to read me don't read me. That's really what it is. So, and on top of that, I'm not like a historian, expert on history. Like I'm not like a anti-colonial activist or anything of that sort. I'm just like a guy who um, tries to write entertaining stuff on my social media channels.
Okay. Well, all right. So I go that's totally understandable, and I appreciate I appreciate and understand why you don't get into that because it can really affect one's blood pressure very quickly. So you're smart not to get into these kinds of debates and polemics and everything. I admire you, Nabeel. I wish I could do that very easily. But basically what's your advice to like to Muslim men regarding this? I mean, do you ignore it? Like is it just basically just this is just like a fact that you're stating and there's nothing you can do about it? Even if not from an Islamic point of view, just from like a health and general well-being point of view.
I mean, I wouldn't call this advice, but like if you look at examples of like if being a good example of a Muslim is one of your goals, and being a good example of Islam is one of your goals, whether or not you want to be like an active kind of preacher, you have much better luck being a Habib than a Muhammad hijab. I will, you know, even though both have their place and both are important in towards important for the quote unquote dawah, um, you can see how much more of an impact Habib has as opposed to Muhammad hijab or I mean not specifically Muhammad hijab, but any of these like Western duat and preachers and things like that. Um, I just mentioned Muhammad hijab because it's the first name that came to mind. But you can replace hijab with anybody, any online dawah personality you can think of. It's 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 more important to actually be so good they can't ignore you than it is to um, be talking about Islamophobia and this, that, and the third. And I know like people will probably not like that I'm saying something like that, but um, you can just see that the way the sort of impact that Habib has on the world and the way that your regular kind of average Joe Muslim has on the world, even be he like a preacher of some sort or the other. Not only that, like forget Khabib, even think about somebody like uh I mean Andrew Tate might be a bad
Sneeko,
example, but think
Sneeko.
about yeah, exactly. I was about to mention Sneeko as well, but think about Andrew Tate as an example. Um, Even though he has his shortcomings, he's an exceptional individual, and he does more for spreading um, the message of Islam than any of the du'at that I can think of, just because he has so much reach. And Sneeko is another example. He had his own um, he had his own after becoming Muslim, his like hardcore new Muslim arc where like you go super hardcore into the deen, and now he's starting to mellow out, where he realizes that like every new Muslim and every somebody who like even a born Muslim who returns back to the deen goes through this where they become like super hardcore for a while and then they realize, okay, maybe I need to chill out a bit. But now, like Sneeko, as an exceptional individual, he's an example as well. He has much more impact from my perspective. Like as a marketer, if I can say like the top of the funnel in terms of attracting people to even ask things about, have questions about Islam and actually start to research the topic.
Um, just to play the devil's advocate again, and I agree with you that a Khabib or even maybe like any of these other MMA fighters that converted to Islam, even ones who are not that famous like Amber Lee Brock, they have a much more greater effect, because they're reaching such a wide audience as opposed to online UK duat. um, so like it's good advice to give people who want to make an impact in spreading the message of Islam. But Nabeel, the other side of the coin is all these UK YouTube duat have by far the longest reach in terms of making Islamic videos and whatnot. And they're basic, for the longest time there was no Muslim spokesperson, for Muslims in the West. It was basically a vacant position. And because YouTube is free reign, they just swooped in and became the de facto voice for Westerners. And you can extend that to say Daniel Hakikaju. Daniel Hakikaju was the first YouTube duat to interview people on the dissident right, which was a completely unknown group to the rest of the Muslim spokespeople. He interviewed Keith Woods and Jean-Francois Garepi and everything. So the other side of the coin, Nabila, is if we don't do something about this, they're just going to take over, that whole Muslim spokesperson thing. So what's your response to that? I mean, one thing you can say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. It's YouTube, it's free reign. The other side of the coin is if we don't challenge them, they're just going to keep on saying things like the West and the white mans who represent everything evil that Muslim governments, that non-Muslim governments have ever done to, the Muslim world. So what's your response to that?
Those kinds of content creators, they are preaching to the choir. They tend to attract mostly a largely a born Muslim audience, and also other like any converts who sort of convert because they're looking for um, a new kind of cultural skin to wear. So I would say that their audience is not the same audience that you would have. You probably have a much better luck, not even luck, like much better um, opportunities to reach out to like your regular kind of non-Muslim person, um, and communicate with them in a way that is relevant to them. And you can see it from their views and the comments on their videos. It vast majority is already a Muslim audience, pro like Arab Muslim in the West, South Asian Muslim in the West, Black Muslim in the West. Those kinds of audiences. They're not reaching they're not reaching net new people. So there's like another kind of marketing term where you're trying to reach net new customers, right? When you're doing your marketing, as opposed to just pulling from an audience of people who are already kind of your customer and then saying that your marketing is having results. Are you adding to the customer pool? I don't think their work is adding to the customer pool. Their work is helpful these once these potential converts convert to Islam and they're looking for answers to their questions. But in terms of appealing to non-Muslims and showing them that Islam is a potential path for their lives, I don't think this is the case. You could just look at like whenever Muhammad Hijab goes on Piers Morgan, like, like it's a train wreck, it's a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Like why how does he like is that a good representation of Islam to non-Muslims? The only people um clapping for hijab's appearance on shows like that are people who are already Muslim. So if that what's his name? The comedian Bassam Yusuf. Is that the name? Yeah, that
Yeah,
is his
Bassem
name.
Youssef.
Yeah,
Yep.
he did much better. He had a much better showing. Um, he came off looking like a sane person because he was trying to like relate as a human. Not only that, he was much more charismatic because he wasn't trying to like win a debate. You know what I mean? Like these guys, like these duat, UK duat, American duat, as the UK ones especially, like they have this debating culture, this refutation culture, right? And every conversation they go into, it's like, oh, I need to win this debate. And so it just makes for a very poor viewing experience for anyone, Muslim or non-Muslim. But they get like they get claps from people from that are already convinced from their own side.
Yeah, that's the other point I wanted to make is that with this style and this format, not only is your audience going to be majority, born Muslim, but the other side of your audience is going to be the most obstinate of haters. And if those are your only interlocutors, it's going to really skew your opinion of what Westerners think about either Islam or Palestine. I mean, if you look at polling in the West, I'm flabbergasted. Support for the Palestinian cause is as high as it's ever been, and you wouldn't engage that from listening to the UK YouTube duat. If you were to watch them, you would think that the overwhelming majority of white Westerners are on the other side, but that's not the case. I think what's happening is that it's what I call the dawa booth effect. The people who don't have any opinion at all, or maybe slightly positive opinions towards Muslims, they're not going to go to a dawa booth. They're not going to say anything at a dawa booth. And the same goes for social media and like Piers Morgan's YouTube channel. The only thing people are going to get are haters. Those are the only people that are going to go to a dawa booth and challenge you. So it's almost like it's an attraction bias. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Maybe it's the format itself. Maybe it's just they're just so caught up in like engaging in Westerners in this way that they're just not getting the audience that we should be talking to. Would you say that's true, Nabeel?
I would agree with that, but before I elaborate, you can stop sharing the screen now. And when you do the edits, you probably want to download the speaker view and only do the speaker plus shared screen view only while I was reading the tweet. Otherwise, it's going to look a little bit weird when you post the replay on your channel.
Oh, my bad. So I'll stop share. I was just doing that to save data. When I have a smaller screen for me and the interviewee, I it takes up less data before my computer crashes. So um so yeah, I think we're kind of really on the same page when it comes to that, Nabeel.
Yeah,
And
on that
go ahead.
on that point that you were making. So, like, if you think about who was generating the most amount of awareness about, let's say, Palestine, because that's the most current one, right? Um, it will probably be, even though like a ton of Muslims were talking about it, probably the most effect in terms of convincing people to feel some sort of empathy and have some sort of support would have been from non-Muslim accounts that are talking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, as opposed to as opposed to just the regular Muslims that are talking about this. So I tend to agree with that point. Um, Again, we're talking about how are we trying to get net new people, right? Reach net new people, people who haven't been reached before. And in that sense, even an account like mine, even though like I said, I'm not a polemicist or a preacher or any kind of any of that sort of thing. My account has taught more people about Islam who might never have even thought to consider even having doing any kind of research about it because um, because the topics that I talk about, my personal brand, my online presence, is not about Islam this, Islam that. It's just about living my life and sharing my story. And so I have reached that these people don't have. I run in online circles that these people have no access to. And in the same way, um, Muslims get introduced to ideas that they would never, like through me, that they would never have access to if the only people they listen to would be these online durat. For example, I don't know how many people I've introduced Mike Cernovich to among the Muslims, but a ton of people, like not just Cernovich, a ton of influencers in the who are non-Muslims who would be relevant for Muslims to listen to were introduced through me because I have a relationship with some of them, I interact with them, I repost their stuff, and so on and so forth.
And it's a good point because a lot of these new converts, they become Muslim. Maybe they have some sort of like previous existing business or entrepreneurial effort, and they already have this kind of reach. But it's almost like being a Muslim becomes their entire essence. It's almost like it's unreachable now. Like it's just your main focal point in every video that you do, and that's something that I need to work on because I have my own efforts as well too. I'm a tennis player. Um, I'm a fan of old school video games. I had my own Twitch stream where I just speed run old video games. So there's many other things that I do, and there's much more of a reach. I think you know what I recommend to these kind of new converts is just even though you're Muslim now and it's changed your lifestyle, be a reachable, approachable human being, and I think that's in many ways can be more effective than going all out and becoming, yeah, which is again there's a place for that. There's a place for the convert who puts on a shalwar kameez and learns Arabic and Urdu and goes to the Muslim world and becomes this huge scholar and uh, becomes an advocate for the Muslim community. But those are few and far between. Um, you know, I think is that kind of what you're getting at, that for many of these converts just be you, just without.
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm getting at. We don't need like Hamza Yusuf part 30. We don't need we don't need Abdullah bin Hamid Ali like part 24. We need we need retro gaming Robert of Canada. Like khalas bro, it's enough now. I mean there is a place for like like serious people to do scholarship and things like that, but uh, f for my part, I think that too many of the quote unquote retards among the Muslim community go to these madrasas and get trained in Islamic scholarship when they don't have the mental capacity to understand the material and apply it in the right way. Um, so you have all these like a ton of people they'll go to Medina, right? Because they get a skull very easy for I mean it's not easy, but a ton of like converts would get to go to Medina and get sponsored and get a scholarship to go study in Medina. Like how many of those sponsor converts actually have the IQ to be serious to level ilm, serious scholars? I think that a lot of damage has been done. And forget converts, like even born Muslims who go to Medina and other places, not just Medina, but other places in the world. Medina is like the most popular one because of the scholarship issue and it you can get sponsored and things like that. But just imagine, like, there's way too many people who went there who don't have the capacity to apply what they to even to understand and even apply what they learn. Yes, they're able to do rote memorization, but they don't have the intellect to apply it correctly. And maybe you could say that's not necessary. They're not trying to do ijtihad. All they have to do is learn a madhab and be qualified enough to apply the teachings of the madhab. But even that requires a certain floor of intellect. I think a lot of damage has been done by by Muslims who aren't smart enough going to study the deen. And I mean, and on the other side of that, one could argue that the very fact that they're able to go study the deen is tawfiq from Allah. And so it was already written for them. And so they learn it because it was Allah's desire for them to learn it. And we know that Allah elevates a person through knowledge of his deen. But at the same time, you can judge a thing by its outcomes, right? So what is the outcome of these uh, like room temperature IQ people going and learning Islamic studies? It hasn't been that great. There's like very few and far between people who are smart enough to take what they learn and apply it correctly.
Right. Uh, yeah, it's unfortunate. And the other thing that I see from many white converts that want to get into like the social media realm is that in an attempt to try to fit in with the greater Muslim community, they themselves like are honestly like the most anti-white among them because they're trying to fit in. Uh, and I really think that they're doing a disservice to the greater Muslim community because by taking this kind of leftist Marxist angle, you know, brother John and sister Sally, they keep talking this way. And then it gives, many other born Muslims look at them and go, well, they know their people the best. And, they think that, their people are irredeemable. So, it gives us free reign, to talk the exact same way. So what would you say to like these, white converts who kind of take this angle that like, you know, the, you know, the problems that Muslims are facing in the West is it's all due to white supremacy and Islamophobia and like we need to be defenders of like the Muslim community. Like what's your message to them?
I think that's okay because like they become part of the ummah, and so it's natural that they feel an affinity to the ummah, and okay, that's fine for them to talk about. But I mean, at the same time, they are part of a tribe, and they shouldn't cut off cut off ties with their tribe. Um, I think we should stop calling it racism and start calling it tribalism. And there's nothing wrong with tribalism. The problem with tribalism is going to extremes in tribalism. Allah said in the Quran, it was He who created tribes and nations so that we may know one another, right? So, who are you to say that being tribal or being a part of a tribe is something that's wrong? The problem is the extremes and um, not following, like allowing your tribal practices or your tribalism to contravene the teachings of Islam just because your tribe does it. And like if you can notice, like not only like non-Muslims don't do that exclusively, even Muslim tribes do it too.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's so many Muslim tribes that have tribal practices that contravene the teachings of Islam. So the tribalism is not an issue. Being a part of a tribe is totally fine. It's going to extremes. So for the white converts, like khalas, bro, we have enough Palestine activists and you know uh Rohingya activists and Uyghur activists. There's plenty now. There's so many of them. And who are you, like the Palestinian refugee and the Uyghur refugee? They know more about that stuff and they could talk more clearly about that stuff than you do. what you ought to be doing is one, if especially if you're a convert. Number one, focus on your religion. Don't get into all of this stuff until your deen is firm and unwavering. That's your number one goal. Like don't even show your face online. Like ideally speaking, like every convert should be forced to deactivate their social media for a year.
Yeah.
Um, they should not be invited to give talks on their convert story. They should not be looked at as any kind of authority. It is like talking to, like asking a baby, a child, to give a speech on theology. It's nonsensical.
Yeah.
And so they should be focusing on the basics of learning the basics of their religion and implementing their religion step by step in a way that doesn't overburden them, so that they can turn those like Islamic practices of worship and things like that into habits long term. That's what they should be doing. They should not be involved in any of this shit.
That's a great a piece of advice, Nabeel. Couldn't have said it better myself. And I knew that when Andrew Tate and Sneeko, when they converted to Islam, that I was very worried that this would happen. That they would get into this gauntlet, having this huge social media account and reach. That now that they made their Islam public, that could create a lot of a lot of pitfalls. So yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of any other questions that I may have had. Did you want to get into the stuff about the gangs, or do you think that's too much of like a hot topic? I think we kind of addressed most of what was already said with the first batch of questions. Um,
I mean, the gangs would be like a separate issue. Again, that's more like something that people living in England would be more qualified to talk about. But again, my tweet on the gangs issue is like people, everybody is like, oh no, yeah, there's white gangs, grooming gangs, raping too. Like, so what? Like, even one is too many for a non-Muslim to be a criminal of. Like, even one case of inappropriate conduct with whoever, whether it's a minor, adult, like even one is too many. Um, there's this verse in the Quran, right? It's in Surah An-Nisa where Allah says, in fact, let me pull it up real quick. Yeah, so the pictorial translation is, O ye who believe, be ye staunch in justice, witnesses for Allah, even though it be against yourselves or your parents or your kindred, whether the case be of a rich man or a poor man, for Allah is nearer unto both of them than ye are. Right? So that's number one. Yeah, that's what we should be talking about. There should be like a reckoning. Um, Instead of trying to do all this whataboutery and passing the buck and blaming other criminals, what we should be doing is having a real conversation with ourselves about why the hell even one Muslim person thought it was okay to do this.
yeah,
Yeah, and I get it. Like maybe, yeah, okay, Muslim, whatever. Like they were born, they're of Muslim descent. Are they Muslim? Who knows, right? Most likely they're just a non-practicing Muslims, criminals of some sort who decided that they want to do this, right? But in any case, it still looks bad on us because they're brown and we're brown, and people are going to ask questions. And so instead of what the strategy seems to be on X right now, and just in general, is point out all the white grooming gangs. What they should be doing is going door to door and establishing the hudud on these criminals, our own criminals. There's this section in Al-Imam Shafi's Kitab where you're not allowed to talk about it if you. And I shouldn't even mention it, but I'm going to mention it because it's an interesting talking point. Where Kitab is like a whole lot of um, He's talking. It's Imam Shafi's major book on fiqh, right? And a lot of the points, the masail, right? Different points of fiqh are are talked about in kind of hypotheticals. And one of the hypotheticals is it permissible for a Muslim to establish the had punishment on someone if he's in a non-Muslim land, or if he is in a Muslim land and he is certain that the Muslim ruler won't enforce the had for a particular crime. And I'm paraphrasing, and I don't have a source for this because it's a long time ago that I came across this. But Imam Shafi'i's discussion, and I can't even attribute to this to him because I can't give you the exact source. But I'll say allegedly, so I don't lie on the Imam by accident. Allegedly, it's the discussion is that